In the spring of 1896, a Harvard psychologist stood before the philosophical clubs of Yale and Brown universities and defended a position his colleagues considered intellectually indecent. The lecture was titled "The Will to Believe." The speaker was William James, and the argument, stripped of its Victorian manners, came down to this: there is a class of facts in this world that cannot come into existence until someone believes in them before the evidence arrives. Not facts about rocks, not facts about planets, facts about what a person becomes. The educated world of 1896 was not ready to hear it, because 19 years earlier, the case against it had been made so cleanly that the question seemed closed. This video walks through that argument, the counter-argument, and what the following century of research did to both. But it should be said at the start why this is more than history. The mechanism James described has not been idle. It runs daily in ordinary minds with remarkable fluency, almost always in reverse. Begin with the man who seemed to have won. In 1877, the mathematician William Clifford published an essay called "The Ethics of Belief," and it contains one of the most quoted sentences in the history of philosophy. It is wrong always, everywhere, and for anyone, to believe anything upon insufficient evidence. Clifford was not making a suggestion. He was drawing a moral law, and he carried it with a story. A ship owner is preparing to send an emigrant ship across the ocean. He knows the vessel is old. He knows repairs were postponed. Doubts visit him, and he finds them unpleasant, so he works on himself. He recalls the ship's many safe voyages. He reflects on providence. He dwells on the honesty of the builders until the doubt dissolves, and he watches the ship leave the harbor with a light heart. The ship goes down in the middle of the Atlantic. Everyone aboard drowns. He collects the insurance money and tells no tales. Clifford's verdict is the part worth slowing down for. The man's sincerity does not acquit him. By the time the ship sailed, his confidence was genuine, and that is precisely the crime. He had no right to that feeling, because he had manufactured it instead of earning it. The belief was stolen property, and Clifford pushed further. Even if the ship had crossed safely, the owner would be just as guilty, because the wrongness lives in how the belief was acquired, not in how the dice happened to land. It is a strong argument. It deserves to be taken seriously, because half of this story belongs to it, and the half that belongs to it will return near the end. For 19 years, it stood as the adult position. Belief is a conclusion. Evidence first, conviction after. Anything else is the ship owner, smiling on the dock. Then James stood up in front of the philosophical clubs and asked a question that sounds almost too simple. Is every belief like the hull of a ship? A hull can be inspected. Its timbers do not care what the owner feels about them. The fact is finished before anyone forms an opinion of it, and the only honest move is to go look. James conceded all of that territory without a fight, but then he pointed at a different kind of fact, the kind that is not finished yet, the kind that is waiting. Whether two strangers come to trust each other is not a fact lying in a drawer, complete, ready for inspection. It is built. And it is built partly out of the advanced trust each one extends before there is proof. Whether a person standing on a mountain ledge clears the gap in front of them depends, in some real measure, on what they believe about the leap in the instant before it. James used exactly this image of the climber in his essays from those years. Hesitation has weight. Doubt reaches the muscles. The belief participates in the outcome. It is supposedly waiting to verify. And that was the scandal of 1896, stated precisely, because precision is what keeps it from collapsing into a slogan. James never said believe whatever feels good. He said, where the outcome includes the believer, belief is one of the causes. In that territory, and only in that territory, demanding evidence first is not rigor. It is a misunderstanding of where evidence comes from. The proof cannot arrive before the belief, because the proof is what the belief produces. Some bridges exist only under a moving foot. Now set the lecture hall aside, because the obvious objection has already formed. It goes, this is all very elegant, but some people are simply not believers. Some minds are too sober for faith ahead of facts. And here observation has something to say, because the claim does not survive contact with an ordinary evening. Consider what already happens without any effort at all. A difficult conversation, rehearsed at night in full detail. A conversation that never takes place. The certainty of being judged in a room where no one has said a word. A future failure imagined so thoroughly that the body responds to it. The shoulders, the stomach, the sleep. None of this comes with evidence. None of it has been inspected like a hull. All of it is believed, completely, fluently, with conviction Clifford himself would envy. This is where the material stops being about 1896 and arrives at you. The capacity to believe ahead of evidence was never missing in you. It is the most practiced skill you own. Every rehearsed rejection, every pre-felt embarrassment, every verdict passed on your own future without trial. That is the will to believe, running at full strength, fluent and disciplined. The only thing that was never chosen is the direction. What James defended in front of a skeptical room, you have been doing all along. Pointed inward, pointed down. And the usual name for that direction deserves a closer look, because it does not call itself faith. It calls itself realism. It presents as the sober position, the adult position, Clifford's position. But watch what it actually does. It predicts the refusal before the ask. It predicts the silence before the message. And then, when the ask is never made and the message is never sent, it records the silence as confirmation. A prediction that gathers its own evidence will never be wrong and never be tested. That is not sobriety. That is faith with the sign reversed, wearing sobriety's clothes. So far, this is philosophy and a recognizable evening. The 20th century is where it acquires laboratories. In 1948, the sociologist Robert Merton published a paper that gave the mechanism its lasting name, the self-fulfilling prophecy. His opening case was a bank. The bank is solvent on a Wednesday morning. The books are sound, the assets are real. Then a rumor of insolvency begins to move. Depositors believe it, and because they believe it, they line up to withdraw. By the end of the day, the bank has actually failed. The rumor was false at breakfast and true by dinner, and what changed the books was the belief itself. Merton's formula was exact. A false definition of a situation evokes behavior that makes the originally false conception come true. A prophecy of this kind does not foresee the future. It recruits one. 20 years later, the mechanism was caught operating somewhere far more personal. In 1968, Robert Rosenthal and Lenore Jacobson published a study known as Pygmalion in the classroom. Teachers at an elementary school were told that certain students had been identified by a test as ready for an intellectual growth spurt. The names were chosen at random. The test was a fiction. Months later, those randomly chosen children showed measurable gains. In the younger grades, substantial ones. Nothing had been done to the children. Something had been done to what the teachers believed about them. And the belief leaked. It leaked through patience, through tone, through the extra second of waiting after a question. through 100 adjustments no teacher was aware of making. The expectation moved through the room like weather, and the children grew in its climate. Honesty requires a footnote here, and this channel keeps its footnotes. The size of the Pygmalion effect has been argued over for 50 years. Replications have found it sometimes strong, sometimes modest. What has survived the arguing is the direction. Expectations are not private. They reach the world through behavior, and the world answers them. What was measured is real. How far it extends is still an open question. And it is worth sitting with the fact that the open question is how far, not whether. Then comes the strangest layer, the one the 19th century could not have seen, because it required looking inside the skull. Over recent decades, neuroscience has been converging on a description of perception that reverses the common sense picture. The brain, in this account, does not work like a camera, passively receiving the world and then forming conclusions. It works like a forecaster. It generates a running prediction of what is out there and what comes next, and the senses are used mainly to check the forecast, to report the errors, the places where reality disagreed. Most of what one experiences as seeing is the prediction itself, corrected on the fly. Hold that next to everything above, because the alignment is uncomfortable. Common sense says belief is the conclusion at the end of perception. First, the world is seen, then opinions form. The predictive account says belief-like expectation sits at the front of perception, shaping what gets noticed, what gets dismissed as noise, what is never registered at all. Two people walk into the same room carrying different forecasts, and in a strict sense, they do not see the same room. The one expecting dismissal finds its signals everywhere, because the forecast was filed before the door opened. Clifford asked where beliefs come from. The harder question turned out to be, what beliefs do before anyone checks them? Which leaves one piece of the puzzle, the piece that explains why all of this is so hard to feel, and why the reversed faith seems so reasonable from the inside. When a belief about oneself changes direction, the world does not respond on schedule. The first weeks of an honest attempt look exactly like the last weeks of the old life. Same rooms, same numbers, same faces reflecting back the person they have records of. And this gap is where the old forecast makes it stand. It points at the unchanged surroundings and says, see, nothing different, nothing real. The argument feels like evidence. It is actually a delay. Consider the night sky. Every point of light in it is an arrival from the past. Light that left its source years, centuries, millennia ago. The sky is not a live broadcast. It is an archive, and it is read in real time as if it were the present. Current circumstances behave the same way. The room you are sitting in, the balance you are used to, the way certain people speak to you. These are largely the arrivals of forecasts made years ago, choices downstream of beliefs that were filed long before tonight. They are not a measurement of what you are. They are light that left a long time ago, still landing, and a person who keeps updating their self-belief to match present circumstances is not being realistic. They are synchronizing themselves to an archive, diligently, sincerely, the way the ship owner was sincere. Now Clifford must be paid what he is owed, because without this part, the whole argument curdles into something cheap. There are territories where he rules absolutely, and they are not small. The load limit of a bridge does not care what the engineer believes. The diagnosis does not negotiate with optimism. The hull is the hull. In every domain where the fact is finished and external, where the believer is not among its causes, evidence first is the only honest order, and faith ahead of facts is the shipowner on the dock. Anyone who stretches James over those territories is not extending his argument. They are breaking it and usually selling something. James's clause governs one territory only, outcomes in which the believer participates. But look at what lives inside that territory. Whether the skill survives the clumsy early stage, whether the attempt is made at all, whether the failure is read as a verdict or as information, whether the person across the table meets confidence or meets an apology in advance, effort, persistence, posture toward the unknown. Every one of them sits downstream of a forecast. The question of what a person becomes is not like the hull of a ship. It is the textbook case of an unfinished fact, perhaps the largest one a human being ever handles. The line between the two territories is not vague. One question locates it instantly. Does this outcome contain me? Where the answer is no, Clifford. Where the answer is yes, and the self is always a yes, the evidence is not waiting to be found. It is waiting to be caused. Return, finally, to the hall in 1896. James was accused, then and ever since, of licensing wishful thinking, of opening a door better left shut. His reply is the part history tends to trim off, and it is the sharpest thing he said. The skeptic, James pointed out, believes he is taking no risk by withholding belief until the evidence is complete. But in the unfinished territory, withholding is not neutral. The climber who waits on the ledge for certainty is not avoiding a bet. He is placing one on the cold, on the fading light, on the failing legs. Refusing to decide is a decision. Abstaining is a wager with worse odds and better manners. There is no observation deck in a life. One is on the ledge by virtue of being alive, and the forecast is already running, and it has never once waited for permission. So the lecture's last implication is the one that room was least prepared to take home, and it has not aged. The belief was never optional. Only the direction was. One has been believing ahead of the evidence all along. Every night the mind runs its forecasts. Every morning the body walks into them. The skill is already trained. The mechanism is already paid for. The single open variable, the one no lecture and no laboratory can settle from outside, is which way it points tonight. If a belief has ever run ahead of your evidence in either direction, that story belongs in the comments.